Good evening. We don't have glassware to clean here. I'm just gonna walk around and tell people hi. I don't have a big voice, but I will walk around and say hi to everybody. We're gonna get started. Donald, we're gonna get started. I will if they don't settle down soon. Okay. Yeah. All right. Are we ready to get started? Yes. Woohoo. All right, first order of business. I know you all are probably feeling really good after having some of those spirits outside. So if you would feel good and come up, we have several empty tables up here, and I don't like talking like if I'm a professor and talking to an empty front class. So invite you all to come up, comfortable seats. Don't be shy. Thank you. Well, good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the Greater Sacramento Urban League's Del Paso Heights Empowerment Center. My name is Lisa Cardosa. Pronouns are she, her, hers, and ella. And I proudly serve as a board member to this great institution and its empowerment movement of community, economic, and business enterprise. Yes, I'm referring to the Greater Sacramento Urban League. I also have the privilege of serving another great Sacramento anchor institution as Vice President for University Advancement at Sacramento State. Stingers up. On behalf of the GSUL Board of Directors, and if I can ask my fellow board members, if you're able to please stand and or wave your hand so that we can acknowledge you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. On behalf of the board, we are pleased to be able to host you in person this evening. We thank you for joining us for this inaugural endeavor and launch of our Black Business Ally and Enterprise Zone, featuring Black entrepreneurs of craft spirits. I hope you had ample time to get to each of the tasting bars as well as the food station. I had to try to stay away from the bars because I had to speak, so I wanted to make sure I wasn't slurred. I would like to give a special shout out to our members of the state legislature and local city and county councils who are able to support us tonight. Elected officials, welcome. I also extend a warm welcome to former Urban League presidents and young professionals joining us, as well as the Urban League staff representing Del Paso Heights and Oak Park, who make community activation happen for all of us. For those of you who may be a bit unfamiliar with GSUL, we are one of 90 affiliates across the country, serving 300 communities of the 113-year-old National Urban League movement. Yes, that's right, the movement is 113 years old. We can clap, we can clap. A lot to be proud of. Our work here is anchored in 5 economic pillars of community impact: civic engagement and leadership development, civil rights and racial justice, economic empowerment, education and youth, and health and quality of life. On our 55th anniversary this year, we are proud to salute the legacy of past leadership and of a visionary new leader in Dwayne Crenshaw, the 8th appointed GSUL president and CEO, charting the course for what is to come. And I promise you'll hear much more about that in just a moment during our fireside chat with our chat host, our most illustrious CEO of Sierra Health Foundation and GSUL board member, stakeholder, and investor, Mr. Chet Hewitt. Launching this first-time empowerment event with a special focus on Black entrepreneurialism and enterprise reflects GSUL's vision for the future. To demonstrate how committed we are to the enterprise, let me share with you that tonight's event is coordinated by a former GSUL young professional and Black female entrepreneur who is also located on Del Paso Boulevard, with a total of 3 businesses, one of which just happens to be a wine lounge. So I made sure to pick up her card, put it in my pocket, and I'm going to make reservations soon. All the spirits being sampled tonight are created by talented Black crafters, vintners, and a local brewmeister. And let's not forget our caterer. What we ask in exchange for this free introduction to these Black enterprise products and services is for you to become both an Urban League activator and advocate by continuing to support these talented Black entrepreneurs after tonight. I know I sure will. So without further ado, Chet and Dwayne, if you'll come up, let's chat. But first, let me also point out that on your table are souvenir 55th anniversary glasses, our gift to you. So please be sure to take one home. There's also pencil and index cards in case you would like to jot down a question to be addressed after the chat. Now, Chet and Dwayne, on to you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Sharing a little bit of history and some background about the Urban League, and I know most of the folks in this room have some idea, if not some affiliation and connection with the work of the Urban League. I'll say that my memory of the Urban League starts as a very young child, growing up in New York City, where my godmother, Miss Edna Williams, God rest her soul, was actually a vice chair for the Urban League in my community. So a long history. First job was actually gotten through the Urban League, as well. It was a long time ago, but I still remember the Urban League and the impact it had on my community. Before I want to start with and get to Dwayne, because this is really about Dwayne in the future and get to introduce him a little bit more if you don't already know him, I want to also talk about how important this conversation really is. We are now exiting the pandemic. We call it, it's now an endemic, which means it isn't as widespread as it was before. But one of the things that we know is that those who are most likely to either become ill, morbidity, or die, mortality, were related to your social economic status. It wasn't about your access to healthcare. Poverty was the number one determinant of who got sick and who died during the pandemic. So when we talk about the Urban League's history and its focus on economic opportunity, racial justice, civil rights, we know how important those things have been. Now, I run a health foundation. We talk about the social determinants of health. People are always wondering whether the social determinants of health are real. Well, the pandemic just showed us how real that really was. This conversation tonight about the future of groups like the Urban League and what it can do to address some of those issues that are associated with our health and well-being is incredibly important. And it's incredibly important because we as a nation are about to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in the economic recovery post-COVID. And so who gets opportunity, where investments are made, are going to determine what health will look like in the future. And my sense is the Urban League has a very important role to play, always has, and even more important as we go forward. So a little bit of context before we get started, right? So Dwayne, some of us know you well, some of us less so. How about if you start by sharing a little bit about your journey, what brings you to the Urban League here in Sacramento, and a little bit about your vision going forward.
Well, thank you, Chet, for co-hosting this or sponsoring this conversation tonight, and thank you all for coming out. We have this brand new surround sound system, and I don't think I'm surrounding too much sound right now. So I'm not sure what I need to do here, but in any case, I am a native San Diegan. I typically introduce myself about 6 years ago. I began saying, I am a Black, gay, Christian, smart man. And folks would say, thank you.
Your big voice.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
I started saying that about 6 years ago. I wish it was 16 or, I'm not 60 years before that. But there's been times in my life where I've been ashamed of being Black. I was too dark-skinned black with my own folks. I was the black kid with the white folks. I was an Oreo because I was smart. I talked white. And if I talk white tonight, I'm doing a good job. I'm good. It's all right. I'm gay and I'm Christian. A man and you're gay, black, gay, Christian, smart man. I didn't fit in anyone's box. But it took me a long time to embrace and love every single one of those identities. And those identities, in my experience with them in different arenas, in different areas over life, have brought me to this point today. In the third grade, I did pretty good on the statewide test. I'm good at filling in the bubbles randomly, and I did okay. And the teacher and the principal got together with my parents, and they said, next year, we're sending Dwayne to Marvin Elementary, San Diego Unified School District, 25 years after Brown versus Board of Education. I left my neighborhood school where I was one of 5 black kids in a school of over 400. I had a class of 30, but I only had 15 at a time. Half the day, I had a teacher for English and social studies, and that she had 15. And the other half of the day, I had a teacher for math and science, and he had 15. Now back on the block, my friends, my peers, my neighbors were still in the class of 30, 34, 35, and if they were lucky, they had a teacher's assistant. 25 years after Brown versus Board of Education, I got an incredible education that one year. I became an advocate for the first time in my life because I told my mom I'm going back home. I'm not taking the bus out here anymore, because I realized what it meant for the first time to be black. I had white teachers, but I didn't really interact in the white world. I thought we were well-to-do. We lived at Emerald Hills, and if you know anything about San Diego, we were on the hill. We were on the very last street at the bottom of the hill, but we weren't in the valley. But I realized out there that my house would fit in a lot of my friends' living room, the whole house. And I was ashamed to, I don't want a birthday party this year, Mom. We're good. So I said, I gotta go back. And that was when they still had the lunch tickets. And so I had to go get my free lunch. And I remember the first day out there on the playground, we're playing kickball. I'm going in and I'm going out, and I'm shy and I'm bashful, I don't know anyone. And finally, Michael Brown, I'll never forget his name, says, the black kid hasn't kicked yet. I went home and told my mom, I'm gonna mess up Michael Brown. She explained to me years before we started using the term what an ally was. And so that's why I got that. So I learned about economics, I learned about educational inequality, I learned about income inequality, I learned about race. That same home, my parents lost their pride and joy. When I was in the 11th grade, my dad worked in the shipyards at NASCO. Good job, good income, we were well-to-do until he literally broke his back on the job, building Navy ships, and wasn't able to get retrained until he was on disability. And every month he got $200, still gets it. My mom, who had been a stay-at-home mom, had to go to work. We're on welfare, and kind of like the lunch cards, we had the food stamps. So I used to go grocery shop with Mom all the time, but I didn't want to go no more. But she was able to get in through the County of San Diego, a workforce development program, and built a 35-year career out at Grossmont Hospital, Sharp Grossmont in San Diego, that she was very, very proud of. In fact, she worked for about 8 years longer than we wanted to because she was so proud, and she ran the place. That was her hospital. But I learned about workforce and what it meant to have a job and the dignity and respect. I learned what it meant to have a home and lose a home. I learned about educational inequality, and I saw a lot of other things. My first adult experience was the day after high school graduation. One of my best friends shot and killed in a drive-by. Funeral 3 days later. That's my first adult experience. I say all of that about my background and my personality, my identities, and those experiences, because I like to say that I like to try to take your pain and make it your purpose, or your pain or passion, or in this case, pain, your profession. So when I got the call, I was laying on the couch enjoying the PPP loan. I figured out how to get it with my nonprofit. And they're like, well, you should go to Sacramento. The Urban League is looking. And I actually said, I kind of like Sacramento. I lived here. I was first out of college, San Diego State, Aztecs, Sweet 16, watch Friday. We're gonna roll the tide. I worked in the legislature. It was my first job. I was an assembly fellow. Loved walking into the BWB, the big white building or the Capitol. That energy was just like nothing I've actually still never experienced again in life. I'm like, okay, Sacramento, cool. Maybe I can dabble in legislation again and policy. And then I found out that we had this vacant lot next door, and they wanted to develop it with housing. And when we had lost our home, I remember the one thing my mom always said was she wanted another home, but not because it was an ownership thing. She said, I just want a washing machine in my garage. I don't want to go to the laundromat. So I said, okay, I can maybe do that development here in Del Paso Heights with this community. And we are going to do that. I'll talk more about that later. And every unit's going to have a washer and dryer in that unit. I bring all that here because I love Sacramento, and I want to give, I see Councilmember Liloli, he mentioned it at Martin Luther King event in January that Forbes magazine said that Sacramento is now the #1 city in California. And
San Diego is #2.
And San Diego's #2. I just wanted to say that I think it's because I came. But I am very passionate about the work that the Urban League does around economic empowerment, education, employment, and it's my life experience that I bring to this every day, and who I am. And that's why I'm here, Chet. That's why I was convinced to leave my couch and come up here to Sacramento. I also realized that I really like the trees. I didn't know until I went to Paris decades later that it's the trees that make it happen. So thank you.
You know, it's always, I think, people always more motivated and committed when they find their vocation rather than finding a job. And you know, there's a difference between the sense of purpose, sense of commitment, your willingness to take on struggle. So you show up here February 1st, I believe, 2022, a little over a year ago. Can you say a little bit about how you found, in what state was the Urban League? What were some of the first things that you thought about doing? Let me just preface by saying this is not a question to think about what wasn't done by other folks in the past. You know, I'm a big believer in continuous quality improvement. Everything we do, right? You do it long enough, you should be better the 300th day than you were on the 200th day, even if you were excellent. So when you think about what you found, we're in the midst of the pandemic. It was not an endemic yet. We weren't calling it that yet. What were some of the first things that you knew you needed to address in order to continue to allow the Urban League to move forward?
I literally moved here January 31st, rented my place online. It worked out okay. And I showed up on February 1st and I was told I had a parking spot down at the end of the little alleyway and park tight because you might get your car swiped. And I walked into this beautiful building and I said, this is nice. And I've been running nonprofits for about 20 years and I've never been with a nonprofit that owns their building. Most of the 90 other affiliates in the Urban League movement don't own their building, but we own this building because of the legacy of leadership of a predecessor of mine, Mr. James Shelby, from the ground up. And I was hoping Mr. Shelby was going to be here tonight. I just wanted to say that our board just last week voted that this very nice room that we done some new paint, some new sound, new AV. You're gonna have some new carpet and other things going in. We're gonna name James Shelby Auditorium.
That's a big goal.
And we met in this room, and there were 17 staff members here. And we had Booker T's food. Where's Booker T? We did the catering then. I remember that. I remember my dad is Booker T, so I know that's Teleferro, Booker T, Washington, Teleferro, Washington. There were 17. Fast forward about a year, we were doing our planning for 2023, and we had our staff retreat out at Accenture. Thank you all for hosting us. We were 34. And that didn't count the 20 community wellness ambassadors that we were able to hire part-time, thanks to a lot of the work with the Sierra Health Foundation around hitting boots on the ground around COVID. But the other thing about this building though, was so the staff has grown. We've done some improvements to the building. We're going to be doing more. But the building was literally locked. It had been locked for about 2 years. And I said, we can't be a community organization in a community, but not be a part of that community. And so that was a big key. So we redid this. We have a church. We have other meetings here. We invite you all. We're going to be doing movie night soon. Councilmember Lalone had an event here. We want you to do that. We had a health fair a few weeks ago. This is the community's place. I like to say, my staff thinks I'm corny. This is your GSUL. Your GSUL. So I think the big things there were, we had an incredible amount of staff growth. We've more than doubled the budget. I was in the right place at the right time. I'll just say that. I got lucky. But we have an incredible team. We're doing some amazing things. And at that first lunch, Danielle Ellison, where's Danielle? You all know Danielle. Danielle makes this happen. Working somewhere. Danielle had on each table a book called The Year We Learned to Fly. And when I talked to the staff about our commitment to excellence, that was a value that I've always held. My mom said, you do first class and there's first class and no class. There's no in between. And that doesn't mean everyone's gonna be perfect. Doesn't mean we have to work ourselves to death. We just always do our best every day because it is for a greater good in the community. So we said this was a year we were gonna learn to fly. And at the retreat, a year, again, fast forward, we did our strategic planning and we said, this is the year we learned to soar and glide to even higher heights in Del Paso Heights. So that's what we're doing. It's been a big change.
That's round of applause. Appreciate your kind of rekindling and calling up, the legacy. Institution is building a lot of great folks. Some whose children in this community were associated with getting this building purchased and built. This building was built for urban league in this community. And James Shelby, who's a friend of mine, I served on the board when James Shelby was actually here. Was an extraordinary individual and a real fighter for communities of color as well. So really excited to hear. You talked about doubling the staff and helping the community respond to COVID. And, you were a great partner of ours, and thank you for all the work you've done here and in Oak Park as well. We're doing some tremendous work. And now we're beginning what we call the big pivot. I talked about it before, the shift from COVID response to COVID recovery. So when you think about what's next for you, what are some of the goals that you're working towards now? Not the things you've achieved, the things you need to do in order to position the Urban League and the community itself it serves to be as successful programmatically as you have been in helping the community respond to COVID.
We heard earlier that we're 113 years old, the second oldest civil rights organization in America. And we were, from our founding, always around housing and jobs and the economic condition and educational equality of our people. And NAACP did more around policy and legislation. And those are important things. And one of the things that I said when I got here is we're going to continue to do the workforce development and the housing. We're one of only 2 HUD certified housing agencies north of the Bay Area Central Valley, all the way to the Oregon border. We're gonna always do that. We're gonna do it better and more effectively and with more a goal of empowering. So I like to tell the story that, Chet, if you come to the Urban League and you need a loaf of bread and some fish, you're gonna get a loaf of bread and some fish. If you need some rental assistance, we're gonna give you some rental assistance. If you need to learn a new skill or get a job, we're gonna help you do that. But what we really want to see, and this is moving forward in the work that we do, is I want you to own the fishery or the fishing ships. I want you to own the fishing market next door in the development we're gonna build that you live in above in the condo that you own. And you're employing folks from the community and helping them on that path. So still the same thing, but our National President Mark Boyle has been saying this a lot lately, and I think this is the direction we want to go. And you're obviously very much into this as well, is that civil rights, the next big battle in civil rights is economic inclusion. Economic inclusion. So that's what we're really into. That's why we're featuring Black entrepreneurs here. That's not an accident. We are hoping to bring in some new commercial retail development next door. We're hoping to put a little pop-up storefront out front of the building here. Maybe talking about converting our little break room into maybe a neighborhood cafe. We want to generate that type of new economic activity and opportunities in workforce development with partnering with GreaterSacUL Economic Council, Accenture, UC Davis, others. We're going to be doing a digital upskilling program. IT's everywhere. You're going to do your own self-checkout now. There's a lot of opportunities for folks to enter into those jobs with a minimum level coming in, and 9 weeks, 12 weeks later, you're making at least 50 grand and you're on your way up. We've done that with COVID dollars. It's been a couple years. Now we're going to do it, and we're going to do a class every quarter. We're going to start a class. We're doing a medical assistant program. The healthcare field, as you know, is growing. Medical assistants make good money as well. We have a partnership with WellSpace where we're bringing folks in, they get trained, they get paid, and they are guaranteed a job when they complete the program. That's the way. This spring break, I'll go to our website, gsul.org. We are going to be having a spring break program. I think it's got Your Money Matters or Get Your Money Right or something like that. Money Motivated. We're going to have that spring break. We're going to have 30 or 40 youth, I don't know the exact number, come and do a week-long fashion design business. They're going to literally learn how to create their own brand. We have a printer we're going to be putting upstairs. We've changed the name of this building to the Economic Empowerment Center. It's not just our office building. It's an Economic Empowerment Center. So those young people are going to learn how to market, design, brand, and actually literally sell on a website what they come up with during that week. So that's kind of where we're at is economic inclusion. We have a federal home loan bank. Donald Terry, Tri-Counties Bank helped us get into that on empowering Black home ownership. And oftentimes we think about first-time home buyers, and we'll obviously want to do that. But what about the folks who live in Del Paso Heights or Oak Park or other parts of the region who have a home that have a valuable asset? And far too often, they pass and the family sells it and we lost that. The wealth isn't transferred. Can we empower current Black home ownership perhaps by helping these folks finance ADUs on their property? So we're helping with the housing situation, but also helping folks develop their generational wealth. So economic inclusion as the civil rights movement is our main focus, and we'll continue to do all the other 5 things that Lisa shared with you around civil rights, and racial justice, civic education, leadership development, health and quality of life. I'm very big on that. You mentioned that. One of the things that I took away is that it's so true that your zip code matters more than your genetic code on your quality of life and your health outcomes. We're going to build that community.
And we know that from health. It's interesting. Another kind of historical piece, and I've referenced a couple of times, well, that's where Martin Luther King's movement was around economic justice as the next kind of big component of the civil rights movement. Really was this notion of economic inclusion and economic, opportunity. We talked about housing as one of your big goals. That's a really important piece. If you know about housing or homelessness in the state of California, and even in our region, about half of the folks who are homeless are actually Black.
Mhm.
And half of that population is actually over the age of 50. And homelessness at that stage really destabilizes communities. Because that age group is usually the most stable of any community. We all know that if you're a young person and things get challenging, who do you go stay with? On poverty. All the folks who we know offer you a place to recover, right? Reassess, and to prosper. So that housing piece you talked about is really important for all communities of color as we think about economic inclusion and opportunity. Because it's hard to find a job when you're preparing to go to work in the back of your car. Right? We know how difficult and how essential a safe, affordable place to live really is. And I talked about COVID morbidity and mortality. Poor housing was one of the primary causes of the spread of the disease. People living in very dense housing environments. So a big piece. I want to follow up on that point because there's a lot of buzz last November about a $2.4 million donation you got from philanthropist Mackenzie Scott. And there's a lot of development. You touched on this a little bit, but I'm going to encourage you to say more about some of the development activity that you want to do on the property that the Urban League, actually owns. You referenced it in passing, but there's a lot of things that you said you want to do. But let's spend a few minutes on that very specific topic. It has the potential to really be a game changer about what can be done in communities people don't look to first to develop.
Del Paso Heights here is very much like my neighborhood in San Diego, just southeast San Diego. Didn't even really get a nice name. It's got a little geographic description. Mackenzie Scott made a transformational gift of $2.4 million to us. And as you mentioned, there were 90 affiliates across the country. Only 25 did she select. And I think it's because of the work that many of you all have been doing in this region in the Urban League. Again, speaking of that legacy of leadership, that we were able to benefit from that. We've owned this land next door since late 2019. And for those of you who've been around, a lot on the corner here next to us, a lot to the south of us, a lot across the street, a lot across the way, all the many lots down the road are boarded, abandoned, or vacant. And they have been for years. I found this big binder that had 11 different plans for Del Paso Heights. And I can't tell you anything's been built. Old redevelopment agency land that was supposed to be put to work and to use for our community, not. So we're going to take that $2.4 million from Mackenzie Scott, and Marysville and Grand, this corner intersection right here, is designated as the catalytic spot for the whole revitalization of Marysville Boulevard from the 80, where it meets Del Paso Boulevard, and continuing down. So on our lot, we're going to activate that, knock on a metal table. We hope that you'll be coming out and joining us later this summer, and we're going to start breaking ground on a 64-unit, accessible, quality, safe housing development. 4 floors of that, 1 studio, 2 bedrooms for seniors, folks who are working folks, stay in their own neighborhood, and then 2 floors of commercial retail. Wouldn't it be nice to have a bank or a dry cleaner? People tell me Trader Joe's. We can't get to Trader Joe's.
Not yet.
Not enough space in that building. But we're looking forward to that. And that's going to be a 3-year project. We're taking $2.4 million from Mackenzie Scott, and our goal is to leverage it 10 times. That's a $24 million development. So I'll be down with the mayor next week, and I met with Councilmember Lololi. We are talking with Congressman Vera about a federal earmark or community built project funding is the euphemism we use nowadays. Councilmember McCarty, not Councilmember McCarty, Assemblymember McCarty, we're talking to him about some state budget. So we're gonna need the public-private partnership in that. We're gonna be working with, hopefully, some of the financial institutions in the region, finance part of it. And you know, oftentimes what happens when we do things in communities like this is people who were here during the bad times, the tough times, get pushed out. And we're committed to making sure that the people who have been here during the tough times are thriving and still here during the good times. So part of that development is not only about the businesses that we're going to bring in, not about the housing that is desperately needed, which is just going to be a drop in the bucket for the overall need. But we are actually going to do, we haven't figured out the model yet, so maybe some of you all who are smarter than I am said you probably should be at the table. We did in San Diego on a development project I worked on, something called Own a Piece of the Block. It was this 20-acre development, and we literally sold shares at $20 a share to everyday folks in the neighborhood. So they all own a piece of that block or that shopping center. And it has a Starbucks, so you know you made it when you got a Starbucks, right? So I don't know if we're gonna do a Starbucks. I think there's an entrepreneur out here who might want to do a coffee shop though. But we are gonna make sure that folks have the opportunity to literally own what's happening in their community. Don't know the model exactly yet, but we'll figure it out together. We're all smart. And the people who lived here during the good times, bad times, can thrive during the good times. Maybe they own a business, move from their home. They don't have to sell it. They can pass it on to the family and move into a senior housing, something of that nature. That's what we're going to be doing. And that's an exciting project. But we're trying to take 2.4, turn it into 24, do this here on Marysville and Grand, the first development in some 30 good years. And we also have had a little extra dollars that we are acquiring the property across the street with the T-Mobile. And there's the T-Mobile's there. There's a vacant lot on the corner. We want to activate that farmer's market, some art exhibit. We should figure that out with community. That's the part of it, is that the community has to be involved in the plans. They own the plans, they own the design. We hopefully will have Black contractors, community contractors, folks from the community actually building it. That's the model that we're going for. And we believe that that can be the economic catalyst to take that 2.4 to 24 to 240 million along the corridor, and probably really more like 2.4 billion over time. That's what we're up to.
Really important number of things you actually said, because there are other communities in the city that had open lots that waited too long. They became commercially viable lots and is now struggling with gentrification, because that's the turnaround. There are folks who weren't there during the hard time now view that particular location close to downtown as being a place they'd like to be, and you're seeing massive numbers of folks being pushed out. And we believe, based on some research, that's in part what's driving disproportionate levels of homelessness in communities of color as well. That's so far. And if you didn't know what it was, because didn't say it initially, was trying to see whether I got any heads nodding in this community, and a few heads nodding in this room who know exactly what's happening in that community. And it is something to be fearful from. My family's from Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn. And I'll tell you, it's the same thing. It's not the Bedford-Stuyvesant my grandparents owned as well. Large community of color. And I always say, you can do it there. If they can push folks of color out of Bedford-Stuyvesant, if you're not mindful and working with groups like the Urban League, it can happen in any place, in any city, at any point. So another round of applause. A vision of inclusive economic development that really is inclusive in its character, not just in its title. Because everybody's talking about development. Great stuff. Sounds like you got a big vision. It's going to take everybody in this room and some of the folks who are not in this room to be part of it, because it's a lot to move. It is doable. It is in fact doable. So in 3 years, we're just looking forward, envisioning, you know, if you come to this building or you drive down Marysville Boulevard, in 3 years, aside from the things you just talked about, the Urban League is going to be doing directly, what is your vision for both the organization and what you hope to have achieved in this community?
You know, they call me a dreamer. I'm not going to start singing. It's not karaoke night. But I've been in this nonprofit game for quite some time. Some people call it industry. Poverty pimping, I've even heard that term. If we were really doing our job right, if we were really committed to economic inclusion and empowerment, in 10 years, I hope the community is running this building and taking care of their issues and working together. And I'm hoping I'm retired on Puerto Vallarta.
Me too.
Working on my tan. But that's the long-term vision. I want to put this out of business. It's time to not be struggling. It's time to get by. It's time to thrive. So that's the bigger global vision. But in 3 years, I think you're going to see it with new businesses lining the streets. Not ones that we created, but that some entrepreneur who's in the room right now, maybe not even know they're an entrepreneur yet, have started a business that you can drive, get off at 80 and not feel like you went into a different place in the city of Sacramento. And you can get off the 80 on the north and drive all the way down to downtown. And like, this is Sacramento. There's street trees. I noticed that in the city of trees, there's not many trees in this neighborhood for some reason. I'm not sure how that happened. But in any case, I think, so in 3 years, we're gonna have thriving schools because the community's gonna own them. They're gonna engage in them. Grant High School, it's positive, they're a partner. But I think we're also gonna see in Oak Park, we have a satellite office in Oak Park. So we're gonna come back and reclaim. Urban League in Sacramento started in Oak Park. We now have a building there that we had a quarter of. We now are occupying half of it, and come July 1st, we're gonna be controlling the entire building. It'll be 6 times what we had before. And we rebranded that, like this is the Economic Empowerment Center. That's our Youth and Family Center. We have the Black Child Legacy Campaign, working on Black infant and maternal health, but we're also doing so much more with the community there. So we're gonna be bringing some of the housing services down there, bringing some of the workforce development services down there, and we're the Greater Sacramento. So perhaps there was an article in the Bee a couple months ago, you may have saw about Placer and the Black folks there. We were excited this Black History Month that we did an event, I think it was for the first time, in Rancho Cordova. At Rancho Cordova City Hall, we brought a bunch of Black folks into the building and honored and celebrated our heritage. So empowering the community throughout the entire Greater Sacramento region, perhaps there's additional satellites. But the big picture is that folks have been truly empowered to start a business, buy a home, build an ADU, make sure that their kid can get the same quality education right here that they can at Christian Brothers or somewhere else outside the realm. That's what I see. Thriving community where children and family and youth are living, working, and playing in their own backyard and proud of it and are well off.
You know, they say true transformation requires a vision. And vision is a hallmark of dreamers. It takes, strategy, how you're going to actually get there. And then it takes, in the real world, a level of policy and advocacy to push back on systems that believe the status quo is okay. And I say that because levels of disinvestment in communities like El Paso didn't just happen accidentally. We all know about the history of redlining and so forth. People don't know there was also green zones and yellow zones. Most people don't know that. Where investment was supposed to be. It's just that things were prevented from coming to certain communities. It was also encouraged levels of investment in other communities as well. And we know that to push back on bad policy making or policy making that exacerbates disadvantage that has been inflicted on communities of color really requires voice and new ideas to be inserted into those policy environments where decisions about resources are being made. You say you're part of an affiliate network, now you run across the nation, and the Urban League has a long history of being in this particular space. What can you say about the Greater Sacramento Urban League and how it's thinking about policy and advocacy to help promote the kind of improvements you're talking about that would benefit not only Oak Park and Del Paso, because you get great policy. It'll impact Meadowview, Lemonville, and a lot of the places that we care about as well. And so what is your vision for kind of ramping up your activity in those spaces?
You know, one of the things I didn't realize a year ago was how powerful the National Urban League movement was. Very powerful, very influential. And 2 weeks ago, I was sitting in the White House, standing about this far away from President Biden, who came in and visited with us and sat with us and talked off the record because he kept it real. And he's about this economic inclusion. And like you're mentioning, all the money that's going to be pouring in. When we talk about the bipartisan infrastructure bill, we talk about the CHIPS Act, and all these other dollars, they've been approved, but we haven't seen nothing yet. But we could miss all of those opportunities if we're not in the room and if the leaders, elected leaders, don't really are paying us lip service or patronizing. We're really in the room. Now, I said earlier that my best time professionally, energetically, was I love working in the Capitol building. I went to law school. Undergrad was to be a teacher. I did my master's work in government around education policy. I wrote my scholarly writing in law school on education reform, carrying over from my third grade, fourth grade experience. We still need to get those policies right. We need to do much more around the civil rights and racial justice. So I'm excited. That's why I came back here. I wanted to play in the BWB, although they're going to tear down a lot of it and build all these other new buildings. But in any case, not bragging, this is the pivotal role that we can have if we play it right, if we're strategic. So 2 weeks ago, we're in the White House. President Biden pops by just to hang out with us, talk frankly. More folks from the National Urban League worked in his administration than any president ever. I come back, and last week, you all saw the governor had a big brouhaha about he's taking on big oil. He asked us to come. So I'm in the governor's office with the governor a week ago. So in the last 2 weeks, with the president, with the governor, you know what they say, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. So we're in the room where it happens. We are, this year, we oftentimes asked to write a letter of support for a piece of legislation or a policy or something of that nature. We did that. This year, we're proactively engaging in the legislature. We're sponsoring, or co-sponsoring, supporting 40 pieces of legislation, 40 intentionally around racial justice, around law enforcement. We're doing predatory lending, something on housing, the issues that matter to our communities. We're at the table, we're in the conversation, we're helping lead the conversation. So we're going to continue to be very proactive, because you're right, it's systems change. And we got a lot of work still yet to change the system. But we're going to be very intentional, investing our time, my time, some of our team. We brought on, I should say, one of the things that happened last year too is we built an entire executive team. That's part of that growth. So we now have a CFO and a chief operating officer and a chief impact officer. Some folks would call it a program, but we want our programs to be impactful, so we call it chief impact. We don't just do programs. A vice president of communications and public affairs, who we're really digging into that work. We are very, very intentionally being at the table on the issues that matter to us, and trying to find not the Band-Aid fixes, but the longer term fixes. So we're excited to be in that. And I think the big oil bill actually passed out of committee today. I was a little earlier testifying. So, and that's about economic justice. It's about environmental justice. It's about racial justice. We talked about, Governor, you're great, you're leading the way on climate. Are we going to do EV stations in Del Paso Heights, Meadowview? Are we going to do green job training? Are we invested in that? Are we helping folks buy these new electric vehicles, hybrid vehicles, that are not cheap? And if you can't plug it in, you don't need it. So how are we being inclusive? That's the conversations we're in at the table. And I would say next year, in future sessions, I would look for us to actually be putting forward something of our very own that we learn from talking to community and being a community. I think the folks with the who are closest to the problems have the best solutions. Is that what they say?
So that's what we say, and that's what we believe, and it's proven to be really quite true. I want to open it up just a few questions from the audience. I know we're getting close to our time. I'll ask you just one last question. There is a lot of talk, as I said this earlier, about inclusive economic development. There's a lot of stages to be on. We've got a lot of good leadership in the governor's office and in the White House. The Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the Inflation Reduction Act, $150 billion, actually targeting communities that have been underinvested in. That's part of that legislation. So that's actually called out from the legislation. And I know, despite those bills being passed, at least under the GA almost a year ago, most people still haven't heard about it. And most people don't know where to go to give their voice to what they'd like to see happen in communities that need to be invested in and are called out in the legislation, either directly or indirectly. So when you're in these meetings with folks who have great influence about implementation, because we often talk about policy, when policy is passed, then it is the regulatory or administrative environment that gets to control where money goes. Right? That's the difference. What kind of conversations are you having with that side of the political system that's really driving where these investments are going to take place?
That's a really good question. And I should have even expanded on the previous conversation about the federal and the state. So Valley Vision, many of you may know, are really leading the SURF. And I forget the acronym.
Community Economic Resilience.
See, there you go. That's why Chet's here. But they're running it for the region. And that's great. They have the capacity. But we Urban League signed up, and we're at the table there. So they're going to be helping determine how we're going to spend this $40 million for this region, $5 million they already have, more to come. I'm pleased to have been appointed to the GreaterSacUL Economic Council. You and I were in San Diego in October, going back home to do the study mission with the chamber. So it's not just in the halls of power, but you're right. It's who are the folks who are going to actually make the rubber meet the road, write the rules. Many of you probably know Dotson Wilson. He was the longtime clerk of the state assembly when I was there. And he put into my mind that I need to know how to read those rules. And like, first of all, you a nerd, Dotson. Don't nobody trying to learn all the rules like you. But he made the point, he's like, he who knows the rules best wins the game. And so in law school, when I was doing civil procedure, everyone hated that. I was like, oh, I'm learning all the rules of court. I'm winning. And I think that's the same thing with being at these tables. It's being able to really dig in, learn the rules. And then in the other part of it is, we're telling Valley Vision, you're going to have community meetings. Because we're not going to talk about an inclusive economy and not include folks who are supposed to be a part of it. So it's great that I'm there, perhaps. It's great that you're there. It's great that others are there. But we really got to bring it back to the ground level. So, and I should also shout out, the mayor had an event tonight competing against us. I don't know how that happened. But we'll be meeting with him next week. But he's got us on, pointed us to his Sacramento Reparations Task Force, which is I have to commend him for his leadership on that, but that's got to be real too. So being in those conversations, really getting into the details, not getting outsmarted, maybe outsmarting, because study, be prepared.
Thank you. Let's have a round of applause again. I hope you feel like me, because I'm feeling a heck of a lot more hopeful after this conversation about what's really possible. Got a lot of committed folks in this room, elected leaders and others, so I know we're going to be working hard to see this community gets its fair share of investment. We ain't talking equality, because communities like this need to get more of what's available since we've gotten less for so very long. You know, that's what it really is. It's just equal amounts distributed equally amongst communities, and hopefully that'll be one of the important outcomes. Let's open up for a couple of questions. I think we can take two at a time. Looking for someone to tell me how much time we have. I don't see anyone, so it's two it's going to be. We're going to start right here. Yes.
Hi, Courtney McKinney with Golden Lives County. Have y'all talked at all with the Community Land Trust about any of the projects down here, or is that a partnership with this board?
Not yet, to be perfectly honest, but I actually worked on a community land trust in San Diego, started the San Diego Community Land Trust, so very familiar with the concept. One of the bills that we helped support last year was with the 40 acres, and it got a lot of state land in the budget last year. So yeah, and that's the land trust model, so definitely want to be engaged in that. I'm not actually aware of what you're talking about yet, but now I know I have homework to do.
And somebody connect with to find out. Another question from the audience? Yes.
Mike Bell, California Mobility Center, Workforce Development Director. You talked about all the conversation you have with these government officials and agencies from fed, state, local. Is there any commitments made from set asides for minority-owned businesses for partner services in the government?
One of the big outcomes that we were announced in DC was that National Urban League, the building trades, and the Department of Labor are investing in a $20 million apprenticeship and pre-apprenticeship program to get ready for what we've been talking about, the infrastructure dollars, all those other things come down the pipeline. We're trying to replicate that here with the California building trades. Hopefully the legislative Black Caucus made something in a budget proposal for us this year to get California added to that mix. Yes, and as Chet said, I think this is why people are scared about being woke, because we so woke that they're actually writing us in black and white. I mean, that means they gotta really do it, right? We hope. So I think that's the positive thing, that we're actually saying it. Working with the board, and I'm very proud of the board and the team here. When we did the strategic planning last May, we revised our mission statement, and literally have the word black in the mission statement now. You know, we have to be unapologetic. And I like to often say that if it's good for black folks, it's gonna be great for everybody else. So, you like that one, huh? But yeah, no, I think that's very important. There's a lot of intentionality. That's another I word.
Well, we're gonna bring this, we're gonna do one more question, and that'll be it. But let me just say before the person asks questions, we're gonna be around for a while, so you get to talk with him a little bit more, even if you ask a question in this particular city. So I apologize for running out of time. You, sir.
Dwayne, you've mentioned some great projects and things that are happening in the Urban League, and I'm sure it's got a lot of people excited. How can people get involved and really help with what you're trying to do with the Urban League?
That's a really great question. So it was pointed out earlier that our event planner was a former young professional, and I'm not sure if many of you know about Urban League Young Professionals. I think it's one of the greatest strengths of the Urban League movement across the country. Folks 40 and under, and the young at heart, because I've aged out a long time ago, but I still want to be cool. We haven't had our affiliate, our Urban League Young Professionals here in Sacramento strong and going for a few years. COVID messed up everything, right? COVID is the reason why I didn't make that wedding like 15 years ago, you know, but we're restarting the Young Professionals. This is our 55th year. And so we are actively seeking tonight. You can walk out and there'll be a form. If you want to join the Young Professionals, $55, 55th year, we're going to go back. And many urban leagues across the country have what's called a guild, which is essentially an auxiliary group or your cheerleaders, your supporters, your advocates. And so we are starting for the first time the Greater Sacramento Urban League Guild, and that's every single one of you. Even if you're too old to be with the cool kids. We need your help, and that's when we're going to the Capitol. Come along with us. We got troops. I don't think I mentioned I'm Son of Baptist minister, which if I talked way too much. Is that there's the story of Nehemiah and how he rebuilt the wall of Jerusalem. But the thing about that story was the painters came and did the painting, the landscapers came and did the landscaping, the rich folks wrote checks on tablets back then. But everybody had a part. And that's the same thing we're going to do here is we need everyone. So if you are talented with financing, perhaps you can help us get the best construction financing deal. If you are into workforce development, as the California Mobility Center, perhaps you can come partner with us and help us get folks into those jobs or those pipelines. If your church wants to come in here and talk about some of these health equity issues, we'd love to do that. So everyone can join the guild. This is your Greater Sacramento Urban League. That form is going to be available as you exit as well. So we need everybody to do their part, whatever way you can do it. Financially, time, talent, treasure. If you have all three, then you're really golden. But whatever you can do, every bit helps, and it's going to take all of us. Big visions certainly can't do it. You and I can't do it. Sierra Health can't do it. It's going to take all of us playing whatever role you can play. So that would be my final pitch.
Well, that was going to be what I was going to ask you to lead with how folks can be engaged and important, but we got a great team that is prompting us to get to that point as well. But I will say this, because I think your point is just worth really understanding. It's a great vision and great ideas. Without a constituency is a failure. Right? Without a constituency, even the greatest of visions are not achieved. So I guess we'll leave by saying everyone has a role to play. And if this is not going to be a performative exercise, and people are serious about change and transformation and equity and inclusion, they're not simply words du jour, words that we all like to say today, if they sound cool and fitting, regardless of your age. Right? Then that means you've got to be activated around those ideas. And clearly, at GSUL, we have a leader who's activated around those ideas. Thank you very much.
Dialogue detailing the great things that have happened over the past 365 days and the inspiring things to come. As the outgoing chairman of the Urban League Board of Directors, and on behalf of the board members, we hope you enjoy this inaugural fireside chat, Black Business Wednesdays, and there is still time before we close for you to enjoy the bars and the food station. I hope you will find your best engagement path to support Wayne and the Greater Sacramento Urban League and all the new events and activities on the horizon. You can also, my pitch, you can also make early commitments to support the mission, the movement, and our work on the 2023 Big Day of Giving on May 4th. Thank you for joining us. Be safe and have a good night.